This is the Partner for Leads Biz podcast for small business owners and personal brand builders. It's for those of you who want to build your business in a smarter, relationships-first way. Welcome to Episode 8, Season 2. I'm your host, Roberto Hernandez. My guest for this episode is Annie LeCroix, host of the Brainy Boss Podcast. We met through a Facebook student community built around a course called Amped Up Podcasting. Annie is a business consultant to small businesses. She really enjoys working with the owners, their systems, and their teams, helping leaders bring out the best in their people. And while Brainy Boss and the consulting thing is a big part of her business life and a theme for her podcast, she's also owner-operator of the Columbia River Institute of Massage Therapy. Impressive she makes and manages all the time to do this. We talk about her business, working in isolation, criteria for attending conferences and why they're so important to her, business consulting/coaching, what she loves about it all, the common conversations she deals with among businesses, why she finds community so valuable, why she started her Brainy Boss podcast, and much more. Okay, here is me and Annie LeCroix. All right, well, we're just going to roll. I'm not going to do a formal welcome to the show, which I guess I just did. But so you and I, Annie, we met at in the Amped Up Podcasting Student Center Facebook group for a course by the same name, Amped Up Podcasting, by our mutual friend, Pat Flynn. And I'm really grateful for having met you there. Tell me, for funsies and for those listening, what your experience has been with the Amped Up Podcasting course. And I guess a little context for those listening. It is a course for people who have already started podcasting and want to lift up their sort of marketing and processes and grow their listener audience. But what's your experience been like?
I've enjoyed it immensely. And of course, I did it for the reasons you're saying, to, amp up the podcast and to market it a little bit better and whatnot. But the biggest thing I've gotten out of this class and Pat Flynn's other class is the community in it, because I've met people like you and other people in our class, and I love this little podcast community that we have found, and I love the support that we give one another in there. And the thing about podcasting is we're all in different places. I'm sitting in my office right now. You're in a different part of the world sitting in your office, and yet we're part of the same community. And I think that that's what I've gotten most out of that class.
And you are inspiring me to engage a little more with that community. I've been a little hair on fire, which is the biggest reason. Well, I don't know if it's number one or number two, but it's definitely number one or two reason I got into the course, because I'm a little bit hair on fire as a entrepreneur, and I need to, better wrap my arms around what's going on. So consequently, I've not been in that community as much as I'd like to be, or as I should be. But a couple of cool things I have definitely found in it are you, and also one of our, I don't think it was you, but I think one of our peers in the Student Center set up a spreadsheet for us to look at of the other podcasts, which is so cool, because now we can go see, hey, are there other people that we'd like to talk to, or ask if we could maybe, mutually be on each other's podcasts or whatever. I thought that was great.
I love it. I like doing that with one another, and I've gotten some great help out of there too. But the nice thing about sometimes if you're quiet and then you get back in and you're more active with the group, it doesn't matter. It's always there. And so that's a nice feature too.
Yeah. And unless you're one of the uber active, which maybe you are, because today I went, looking, online before our conversation, as I always do, and there you were at the top of the list. So maybe that's just you, which is wonderful. So it looks
that's because I'm currently having a tech problem, and that is my talent does not lie in tech, and so there's so much tech that's involved in podcasting. So right now I will be honest and say I'm in the middle of a very frustrating issue that I'm hoping to get resolved through our group.
Well, if not, I don't know if I want to go down the quagmire of tech stuff for the benefit or non-benefit of our listeners. But if you haven't resolved it yet and you think there might be anything I can help with, for sure, ping me after we talk today.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it looks like your Brainy Boss podcast started last year. and assuming that is correct, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what inspired you to create it?
Well, it did. It started technically last year on December 31st. So it started on the very last day of last year. Yeah. So you are correct. And what inspired me to start it, there are a few different things. One, I've done consulting for a lot of people here locally where I live, and I've never expanded that. I've never taken it online, and I haven't expanded that knowledge base. And I just realized that there were so many conversations that I was having over and over again with different entrepreneurs that I thought, why not have these conversations in a podcast that is accessible to everybody so that people could realize that we have these shared experiences, because entrepreneurship can be very isolating sometimes. So part of my motivation was in that isolation. I live in a very small town, and I'm not around a lot of other people that do what I do. So that was one reason. The other reason is because I love consuming podcasts myself. I think they're so fun to consume and listen to, and I've learned so much from them. And then the third reason is I am expanding my small business consulting, and podcasting is a nice vehicle by which to do that.
What, I'm probably hopping over a couple of questions preceding this one, but I'm dying to ask, what do you like best about small business consulting, or the various types of consulting that you've done? Where do you get the most enjoyment from it?
My real love is in leadership of small businesses. And my particular niche is tiny businesses, where the entrepreneur, the business owner, is doing the majority of the work and then has a tiny team, usually around 5 or less people, that help them get the work done. And because the leadership in those situations is significantly different in a bigger company where there's a human resources director and there's people that manage, there's multiple levels of hierarchy with management. And so I like working with the owner and their leadership style and the systems they have in their place in business to get the most out of their small team. Because even though our businesses are small, they're still big for us, and they're still mighty. And a small business, a team of 5 people can still get amazing things done, but the leadership style is very different than it would be in something bigger. So that's my real focus, is working with the human that owns the business in bringing out the best that they can in themselves and their employees. That's
cool. It's funny. I have read about over the years of so many businesses that on the outside look like titans in their industry, and they're run by a half a dozen people in the beginning, in the early days, and sometimes for many years, but maybe they'll scale up. Like I think I had heard an interview with the founder, co-creator and founder of Stripe, the merchant processing company, and I believe in the early days they were doing some phenomenal things with a very small team, but consequently, as the venture funding and those things come in, the team is gigantic now in comparison. But what are some of the most common conversations that you, and maybe the answer has evolved, but when you decided that the podcast was a good idea, what were some of the conversations that stick out in your mind that were occurring over and over?
Well, I think probably the biggest one is the sense that nobody understands you. The sense that you're in your own business and you're doing your own things and you're having these struggles that other people don't understand. And that can lead to imposter syndrome, the belief that you're doing something wrong, the belief that you aren't very good at your business, because you're in this echo chamber and you're seeing your own mistakes and you're seeing where you can improve, and you can start to doubt yourself. And unless you actively go out and interface with other people that are also owning a business, it's really easy to let that self-doubt creep in. Mm-hmm. And so feeling alone is probably the biggest one, because a lot of times when I'm consulting with someone, there's almost this idea of, gosh, I'm so embarrassed to tell you this, but I've done a really bad job with organization, and I don't want anybody to know. And I say, well, everybody's been there. That's not you. That's something that we've all struggled with, especially when you're starting a business and you're so busy, like you said, hair on fire. your hair on fire. And so often we say, I'm going to get to that later, but many times later doesn't happen. And so then people that are working alone begin to think that every other business in the world is perfectly organized and it's them that's not. So I wanted people to know that's typical. That's how we all feel. We need more time to do the things that we're needing to get done, and we're not alone in that.
I had another guest on here. Maybe her episode was around Valentine's Day, and we probably did the interview shortly before then. But she went from the medical devices field as an engineer into creating a business that where she's making artisan truffles. And
wow.
I asked her about for whatever reason, our conversation led me to ask her about what I call a silo, operating in this vacuum, and you just described it in a unique way. And I was asking her, what do you do to keep the voices of self-doubt at bay? And it was just the simple being around other startup founders, and
right.
Realizing that she shared many of the same struggles that they did. Do you have, like in your life, in your circle, or with your clients, examples of the best places to surround yourself with the type of human contact that you encourage people to engage in to get out of that situation?
I don't feel like there's one go-to for that, because I feel like you need to find what works for you. I prefer in-person stuff, which is really unfortunate because I live in the middle of nowhere. So I prefer in-person things, which means I'm somebody that tends to go to a lot of conferences and conventions and tends to find my tribe in those places and then keep in contact with them. But going back to the class that we're in together, that's why I like that class, because I feel like I can get to know people and be in person with people, even though it is online. So that tends to be my preference. But along those lines, which is going to seem contradictory, is I tend to not like networking meetings, like local networking meetings, because I don't feel like they really get into the depths of what I want to get into. Usually networking meetings are people getting together just kind of saying, hey, how's it been? And everybody goes, oh, busy. And you go, yeah. But I really want to get into the meat of stuff with people and talk about what are we struggling with? What are some of our victories? What are we doing? And I have just had more success at conferences where you can spend a little bit more time with people and it's longer than a 1-hour networking meeting. So that's for some people. And then some people don't want to do that. They don't want to be spending the money or the time going to conferences. And so I'll say, find a local networking group or find an online group. So I think that there's probably not a one size fits all, but the one thing that is necessary and consistent is finding a group, even if it's 2 other people, even if it's 1 other person, finding someone else that you can repeatedly go to and reach out to in moments of victory and moments of struggle.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about the latter 2 that you mentioned is surrounding yourself with your tribe, or people that are like-minded or working on similar things who really share some of the same problems. I don't know if you knew this, but Partner for Leads, or this podcast, was inspired and created for a membership community that is the small networking groups, and literally referral leads groups. But I totally get it. It's funny. We started in 2007, Partner for Leads, and I've been the community manager for them all that time. And today I'm kind of, operations and community management. But I get it. I somewhat fell into it because I was a participant in a similar organization, and then I was in the startup, sort of having left tech and gone back into tech. I ended up in a startup world, and there was a guy there that I worked with that had a fascination with the then model for networking groups and the lack of online tools. So anyway, we launched what then was a pretty innovative platform for networking groups, and I think everyone's catching up now, and it's a lot easier to put those things together. But I get it, though. I think mastermind groups, conferences for me are super. Now, having said that, you and I were talking about where we live, and I'm in Panama in a beach community, and the population density is considerably different than where I moved from, which was Silicon Valley, right in the heart of it. So I have known of and have attended once before a networking group run here locally, and I went and visited again recently, largely because they gave me the opportunity to speak about podcasting. So I did, and that was great. But the first time I went, I didn't live here in this community, so going back and knowing a few more people and faces made a big difference. And just for the sake that you said about getting a little human contact if you happen to be in a small community, which I am, getting out and doing whatever you have to, I think is great. So I decided actually in the last couple of weeks that I would make it a quarterly thing to go to that meeting. They meet weekly, but I don't, for me personally, I don't think it's a good weekly commitment, but I think to go there quarterly and they're welcoming, a great thing. But yeah, love the conferences. So do you have conferences on your schedule or on your target list for this year upcoming?
I do. I'm actually headed to Craft and Commerce in Idaho. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's not just for podcasting, but it's for basically online marketing, and it's a ConvertKit conference. I know you're familiar with ConvertKit. So I'm headed to that, which I'm excited about. That one, that's my only conference related to podcasting and that business, my Brainy Boss business. But I'm also headed to 2 additional conferences that are related to my other job, which is as a massage educator. And so I'm in very different, I said tribes earlier. The podcasting community and the massage community are very different. So my conferences have just a very different feel. But yes, I've got 3 more scheduled for this year, and I just came back from one last weekend that was in San Diego.
That's super interesting, and I understand. Weirdly, I understand the differences between those communities because of the referral leads groups that I have been community manager for since 2007, because among other professions, we deal with health and wellness or holistic wellness professionals, including massage therapists.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I can imagine, but that is really neat that you have the 2, I don't know if they're extremes, but maybe they are on some scale, 2 extremes of communities. What is your... this is great personal satisfaction to ask you these questions, but I assume they would be good for listeners too. But what is your criteria for attending conferences? And I know, having done a few, and I don't do them as actively as you are this year, and maybe this is an annual thing for you to attend so many, but what's your criteria for deciding which ones to go to?
I think that is such a fantastic question, because I've talked to a lot of people about this, where people don't necessarily want to spend the money to travel and the time if they don't know if the conference is going to be good. And I'll tell you that I've been to a lot of bad conferences for sure. So my criteria tends to be, well, let me back up for a second. In my massage world, I've been attending conferences every year for the last decade, and multiple conferences. And now I've narrowed myself down to 2 that I really like. And my reason for them are, 1, the content is solid, and that I have not wasted my time flying around the country for content that was not thoughtfully put together. I've been to conferences that are more of just like, hey, let's get together and see what happens. And those frustrate me. I am a very content-driven person, and I'm very time-oriented. So I want an agenda that is meaty and full and relevant and is well presented. So conferences that are well prepared for and that have a variety of topics for me to pick from. I like conferences that have multiple tracks, which might be more common in the massage industry. I don't know enough about other industries to say this, but in the conference that I just went to had the track of management or education, where you could have picked a class that was all about marketing and all about enrollment for your school, or you could have picked a track that was about teaching this topic better. And so I like that. I like multiple things where I can pick and choose, sort of like a conference buffet, I guess. I like that. And that's one criteria for the conference. And then I also want there to be time for me to interface with other people at the conference so that I can sit down and meet people and get to know people. I love to meet people in person whenever I can. I like to reach out to people and say, are you going to be at that conference? And then make a point of spending a little time with them, even if it's 5 minutes, because there's something about that human contact. So I know that was a really long answer to your question, but that's my criteria. Did that make sense?
Yes, it made perfect sense. Okay. And I love it. I think if I ask the same question of someone else on a similar trajectory of their business, I'd get possibly a different answer and equally informative, but that's really good. The last big conference I went to was not of the multi-track variety that I believe you were describing, and I have been to those. So it's something to think about for future ones. I hadn't really even thought about it, but suddenly I realize there's there's a big contrast in the difference of having the multi-track thing and the thing where you're essentially all together for pretty much the entire conference. And then, of course, you have hopefully have the one-on-one time. And I especially love, though, that I'm kind of imagining some of the methods by which you do this, but I love that you intentionally and premeditatedly, with premeditation, seek out people to meet with, even if it's just for a few minutes. That's brilliant.
Yeah, just to say hello and say this is our face, not via Facebook or Twitter or something like that. The other thing that I just want to add is this last conference I went to, they'd have like one session that was a whole group. And then they provided lunch, so people weren't all leaving and spreading out and going different places for lunch. They provided lunch, so everybody stays together. And then the afternoon sessions, you'd pick your track, and then you'd come back together for dinner, and then you'd go away for the next session. And I thought it was just sort of a brilliant way to do it, and it was also all in one place. So nobody's leaving to get dinner. Nobody's leaving to do something else. Everybody's staying in the same place and eating together and talking together and taking breaks together for the whole weekend, which I think is really brilliant.
It is. It's funny. I'm thinking about the last conference I went to, which has been a while now, so shame on me. I didn't really do any. Did I not do any last year? I don't think so, but it was in London. And so getting out and venturing to lunch spots with a small group and to dinner, where one night I actually walked by an outdoor concert event that U2 was playing at. Would not have happened had we been all together. However, having said that, I have done the other too, and yeah, that can be valuable. A lot of things to consider. That's great. I'm so glad we talked about that. Let's see. So I asked you about the inspiration for the podcast. I don't know how closely related they are, but what about the inspiration for the overarching Brainy Boss business?
They're closely related. I think that can I tell you a little bit about my other business, because it feeds right into how Brainy Boss came to be. Okay, yes. And this might be a little bit long of an answer, but I think it's really relevant. So I happen to be in a tiny niche. Like I own a massage school in a small town. So first of all, there are not many massage schools in the country. I think the count has been changing dramatically, which is a whole different story. But I think at last count, there's 700 in the country. Of those 700, there's very few, much less, that are at the level that I'm at, which is a very small boutique school. So I only take 6 students at a time. And then I'm the primary instructor. So this is all getting to a point. So I don't have any direct peers. I have very few direct peers. Let me put it that way. There's maybe 5 other people that I can think of in the country that have the same model that I have. and I live in a small town. So I felt isolated not only by my location and not only by my geography, but also by what I was doing. And I thought, there's no way for me to get a consultant. There's no way for me to go to a conference because nobody gets what I do. And I say that in all capital letters, right? Because this is a great story we tell ourselves to believe that we are super special and everything is super unique to what we're doing. But at the end of the day, business is business, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I realized that a principle was still a principle, regardless of if you own a massage school or whatever, you're selling dog treats. I don't know why that came to my mind, but no matter how different the businesses are, there are certain principles that are true across businesses. And I started to realize that because I felt so alone and I felt so isolated, and I felt that when I would reach out to people, I felt like they couldn't possibly understand what I was doing. And so there was no point in trying to explain my particular struggle at the time.
What does that mean when you say they couldn't possibly understand what you were doing?
Well, I mean that I'd get in my own head and I would say, well, nobody, and I'm saying this in this where you're having your own pity party, right? Nobody understands what it's like to be a teacher for this tiny massage school. A big school owner doesn't understand because they have other staff helping them. So nobody gets my problem. My problems are unique. My problems are special. And so we have this little pity party with ourselves that keeps us from reaching out to people because we think that these problems are unique, where it's, yes, maybe the specificity of my problem is unique, like I'm having trouble getting this done because I'm in the classroom all the time. But it's a principle, and the principle is how do we manage our time better? The principle is how do we bring on team members to help us get stuff done? The principle is how do we set up better systems to create more time in our day? And so when I realized that those things were the same in all businesses, and when I was consulting with other businesses, and I was realizing they were articulating similar problems that I was having just in their own business structure, I realized that we need to be able to see that. We need to be able to see that you can be doing your business and I can be doing my business, but we're still going to have a common struggle or a common victory that we can share, right? You need more customers, whatever that is. You need more customers, clients, whatever your demographic calls it. And that's the same as I need in my own way. So we can talk about how to solve those problems instead of me saying, well, you don't understand because my customers are massage therapy students.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I still have to get more customers, but it doesn't matter if they're different than yours. And so trying to wrap it up to my point is that Brainy Boss was this realization and this desire to say, it doesn't matter what your business is. We all have the same things at the end of the day. And so how do we solve those problems? Because all of us are smart enough to extrapolate your solution to apply it to my business. We all have the ability to do that. So what is the problem that you solved? How did you solve it? And how can I use those principles to apply it to solve my own problem? And that's what Brainy Boss was born out of, is the common denominator of we have this tiny team that we need to lead. And it doesn't matter what we're leading them to do. And I found that from my own struggles, and I found that from other people's struggles.
Yeah, that which you alluded to at the top of our conversation about it wasn't your word, but mine, one that I use a lot, the silo that you were in and
yes.
Thinking that your problems were unique. I love the Brainy Boss what looks to be the tagline, which is for the workaholics, control freaks, and perfectionists. Get more done in less time, plus learn new tools to make your business more efficient.
Yeah.
There's a facet of it that I'm curious about. So as a business consultant, which you have mentioned you've done for some time now, I would imagine whether you like having them, the next word be at times synonymous with business consultant. I understand the separation for sure, but do you feel that you are also a coach or coaching? Do you see them as very similar or very different?
I see them as pretty similar. I know that it's funny that you asked me that because people go back and forth. I see them as similar, and I guess I happen to like the word consultant better. There's nothing special. It's not deeper than that. Mm-hmm. That's it. I think coach and consultant are similar. I do think it changes in bigger businesses because I think a consultant can be maybe more specific to something like a financial consultant or a human resources consultant, and a coach maybe suggests more one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And I basically work one-on-one, but to me they're interchangeable. I just think I picked consultant for no particular deep reason.
I'm laughing, imagining that some business consultants have no interest in getting into emotional baggage that perhaps coaching kind of implies or invites. So,
and that's a really good point because I don't think you can. I deeply believe that you can't consult with any business or coach any business, whatever word you're going to use, of any size, without getting into emotional baggage because we are human beings, and you are interacting with a human being who woke up feeling a way and has other things that are coming in, their family, their friends, their relationships, whatever, financial stress. And so I agree with you. I think that there might be, hey, we're not going to focus on your emotional baggage. We're going to focus on just what the business is doing. But this is a big distinction between a bigger business and my focus on these tiny businesses is if I am the leader of my small team and I have issues going on emotionally, that is how, as I go, the team goes. That will have a direct impact on their performance. So I really can't work with an entrepreneur without knowing where they're at and how they handle stress and how they take care of themselves and how they manage their own well-being. I cannot effectively consult with somebody without getting into that, usually in the beginning.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And to give a little context on something that we mentioned, which will quite possibly not be provided at the front end of our conversation for those who listen to the finished episode, you live outside of Seattle, Washington, in a small community, which you've mentioned being a small community a couple times, in a place called Wenatchee. Did I say it correct? Wenatchee. Did I say it right?
Yep, you got it.
The second time, right?
Yes, Wenatchee.
So small community, fascinating to me that you have built so much or perhaps all of this out of that small community. I guess it speaks to your personality, and also to the fact that it's things are a little more accessible and doable with technology. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure, because I can have conferences with people and because of technology and all of that stuff. And I'm 2.5 hours from Seattle, and there is an airport here, but there's 2 flights a day. So if I want to go to a conference, if I want to go to where people are, it's an adventure for me, right? Well, I'm sure you're in the same boat because you're in Panama, so you have to. It's when people are in Seattle and they say, "Oh, hey, I'm going to fly down to San Diego," they can do that really quickly in just a couple hours. I have to make a trip over the mountains, get to the airport, then fly down, and then do the same thing. So usually I have a full day added onto any kind of travel that I want to do. And so technology makes it far easier, which is another part of why I wanted to do Brainy Boss, is because I was consulting here, but I wanted to expand that to other people. And I can consult with anybody I use Zoom, but Skype, Zoom, there's a lot of things that we can use and talk to anybody anywhere. So again, going back to this isolated entrepreneur, wherever you are as the listener. If you're a listener and you are running a business in the middle of nowhere, you and I can talk, and we're not confined by our geography.
Indeed. Are you a Star Trek fan by chance?
Yeah, I almost do not want to say this out loud, but I've never seen it.
You know why I ask, right?
I don't know why you ask, and I know that I should know this, but I don't. I've never watched it, and I know people are freaking out. But anyway, go ahead.
No, not everyone's freaking out, believe me. Well, on your website, brainyboss.co, there is a menu option that says "Work with me," and when I hover over it, it says "Mind Meld," which is to me a Star Trek reference. I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool.
That's totally accidental. I want to pretend that I meant it that way, but nope. I just I like the word mind meld because it's like getting together and just being able to pour out what's in our brains and have somebody that hears you and listens to that. But I didn't know it was a Star Trek reference.
Yes, and it's actually come up in the new series. Can you tell I'm a Star Trek nerd?
Oh my gosh, that is too funny. I'm so glad you pointed that out to me.
It's related to a character named Spock who was in the original series, who actually, there's a Netflix special about him, the actor, Leonard Nimoy, which is pretty interesting, particularly if you happen to be a fan. But he's referenced in the new series, so I thought maybe you were. Okay, but I digress.
Know who Spock is. I will say I know who Spock and Leonard Nimoy is, so I'm hoping that gets me a little street cred back for not having watched an episode.
Maybe you should just come up with some good shtick for the next person that asks you.
I will.
You about that.
I definitely will.
What is your favorite source or resource for business consulting and coaching? And I mean specifically, what are your favorite what's your favorite toolkit that you've come across, be it a book or some other material that has just been instrumental in helping you develop your personality as a business consultant?
I will tell you that in the beginning, it just was me talking to people and kind of learning in the beginning, so that I didn't necessarily have a resource. But later, as I sought out resources, my favorite book is The Coaching Habit, and his name is escaping me right now. Let me look it up here. But that is, it is from Box of Crayons, Michael Stanier. I think I'm saying that right. The Coaching Habit. And that's probably my very favorite resource. I think part of it is one of the reasons why it's my favorite resource is because it's sort of what I was doing anyway, which is always nice. And then he made it much clearer to me in a much more helpful way. So that's probably my favorite resource.
And his
website is Box of. Have you? Isn't it great?
Yeah.
Have you looked at his website, theboxofcrayons.com? It's a great resource.
It's been a long time. I'm going to go back to it. Thank you for bringing it up. And frankly, yeah. I do think it's a good book, and I extracted some gems from it, believe me. But I am also, I don't know why, but I'm also amazed that it is so commonly mentioned when people talk about this topic. And I don't know why. I'm just like, well, yeah, it's a good book, but
yeah,
and it's a really good book. And like I said, I really got some gems out of it. And I think and maybe I'm answering the question as to why, or answering the mystery for myself. It's probably one that I'll go back and look at again, because I think about it a lot, not so much in great detail about, oh man, I should go read that chapter again, but I think just it's mentioned so often, and having pulled from it the things that I did. And I so wanted to mention another book, and it has something about a beautiful question in the title. And I wanted to mention it because for me, I'm typing, and I know this is coming through on the sound. I got to get I need to improve the setup here. Because A More Beautiful Question, I believe, is the name of it, by Warren Berger.
Oh, yeah, the Coaching and the Art of Asking Beautiful Questions. Yeah, a book of beautiful questions.
This one happened. Yeah, you're right. That is. Yep.
The Book of Beautiful Questions.
Yeah, a great read, and just wanted to mention it. I'll put all that in the show notes for people who want to geek out on it some more. Well, Anne, thank you for spending time with me today. It's been super nice talking to you. And lest I forget at the top of the episode, let's just say it right here, but it looks like anyone who wants to know about this whole Brainy Boss thing can find you at brainyboss.co. And I don't know if it will necessarily lead them there, but for those who are interested in the massage school, the Columbia River Institute of Massage Therapy, that one is CRI as in Columbia River Institute. So it's crimassage.com. And I think you should check it out if you're listening to this.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I also want to say that anybody that does want to reach out to me on Brainy Boss, I actually answer my emails. Like, it's me answering emails. And I love hearing from people. I just love when people reach out to me and email. And there's been a few people that I've started to kind of have an email back and forth relationship with that I've just met because of my podcast. So I invite anybody to do that.
That is great. And I will tell you listeners that you should do it. She's in a small community like I am, and it can get lonely. So those emails are super meaningful.
They really are. I get so excited. I go, oh, yay. So yeah, it's definitely exciting. I really appreciate spending the time talking to you today. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, it's been super fun. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your favorites. And if you have a couple of extra minutes, please leave a review. It really helps other entrepreneurial types find the podcast so that they too can learn from the trial and error, the expertise, the insights of successful business owners like you. This podcast was produced by yours truly for the Partner for Leads community. The intro-outro music is a track composed and performed by my good friend Frank Salazar. Are you struggling to get the word out about your business? Struggling to get in front of the right prospects at the right time? Head over to partnerforleads.com and join our community. As a member, you'll get an occasional email from me with tips, hacks, stuff I'm learning from guests of this podcast. Plus, you'll get access to content curated especially for community members. You'll also get a copy of my Starting a Mastermind Group Blueprint, a token of my appreciation. This is all stuff you can use to grow your business. It's free, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Ciao for now.